Most oxygen in the blood is transported bound to hemoglobin. Physically dissolved oxygen, that is, little oxygen physically dissolves in plasma water because oxygen is poorly soluble in body fluids. At normal arterial partial pressures of oxygen, which is 100 millimeters of mercury, 3 ml of oxygen can dissolve in 1 liter of blood. So that's 15 ml of oxygen for a cardiac output of 5 liters per minute. Under resting conditions, cells use about 250 ml of oxygen per minute, and this may increase 25-fold in the event of an exercise. To deliver the oxygen needed for the tissues, that would mean a cardiac output of 83.3 liters per minute if oxygen was delivered by just dissolved form in plasma, and that's insane. However, the solution to this problem is hemoglobin. The way hemoglobin works is one hemoglobin molecule is able to bind with 4 molecules of oxygen. It does this by taking oxygen that is dissolved in the blood plasma. This is similar to how a sponge put in a bucket of water will absorb the water, and the person bathing with a bucket of water will not be able to use the water that is in the sponge, but can squeeze the sponge to release the amount of water stuck in it and use it. In the same way, the oxygen bound to the hemoglobin is not available for the body unless it's released in certain conditions. The partial pressure of oxygen is the primary factor in determining the percent hemoglobin saturation. We'll be referring to the partial pressure of oxygen as PO2. Okay. So when PO2 is increased, the equation drives to the right in concordance with the law of mass action. Let's talk about the oxygen hemoglobin dissociation. So the relationship between oxygen and hemoglobin is not linear, it's sigmoid shaped. There's a plateau between 60 millimeters of mercury and 100 millimeters of mercury, where a rise in PO2 produces only a small increase in the extent to which Hb is bound with oxygen. However, between 0 and 60 millimeters of mercury, a small change in PO2 produces a large change in Hb combined to oxygen. Factors at the tissue level which promotes the unloading of oxygen from hemoglobin. So though the main factor in determining the percentage saturation of hemoglobin is the PO2 of the blood, other factors can affect the affinity or bond strength between hemoglobin and oxygen and shift the oxygen hemoglobin curve. And these are 1. Carbon dioxide, 2. The acidity or the pH of the blood, 3. The temperature, and 4. 2,3-bisphosphoglycerate. Now I want you to think about it for a moment, and let's we're able to tell this like real easy. When you're exercising, do you need more oxygen? If you answered yes to that question, you are right, correct for 3 points. Now good. So now you can go back and look at the curve and ask yourself, in which case do you want the curve to shift to the right, and in which case would you want the curve to shift to the left? If you answered you would want the curve to shift to the right when you need more oxygen, you are right again for 3 points. Because if it shifts to the right, what happens is that hemoglobin is more likely to release the oxygen it has than if it shifts to the left. If it shifts to the left, it's more likely to keep the oxygen that it has. Okay, great. Now let's go back to the factors again. Do the factors that were mentioned increase during exercise? Do you produce more carbon dioxide during exercise? Yes, we do produce more carbon dioxide. Does our blood become more acidic as we exercise? Yes, it does, because we produce lactic acid through anaerobic respiration at some point. Then does temperature increase? Yes, think about the last time you ran. You were all sweaty. You were sweating because your body was trying to cool down your temperature. So great. So now ask yourself, are these factors going to shift the curve to the right or to the left? We already agreed that if we need to offload more oxygen from the hemoglobin, we need to shift to the right. So the answer is it shifts to the right. So carbon dioxide acidity and temperature, when they increase, shifts the curve to the right. Now let's talk about 2,3-bisphosphoglycerate, which is more Interesting. So it's a molecule that is produced in red blood cells whenever the hemoglobin in the arterial blood is chronically unsaturated, like in people living in high altitudes or those in certain types of circulatory or respiratory distress disease or anemia, like sickle cell. So that's one way the body maintains oxygen availability when arterial oxygen supply is chronically reduced, right? So hemoglobin has a much higher affinity for carbon monoxide than oxygen. The hemoglobin affinity for carbon monoxide is 240 times that's its affinity for oxygen. Carbon monoxide is a byproduct of incomplete combustion of carbon products such as coal, wood, tobacco. Carbon monoxide is especially dangerous because it's insidious. For example, in a parked car with the motor running and windows closed, it can reach lethal levels without the victim knowing because it's odorless, colorless, tasteless, and non-irritating, and will not cause any sensation of breathlessness to increase ventilation, even though the cells are oxygen starved for reasons which have already been discussed. Alright, so practice example. So let's say that it's one cold winter Christmas Eve night, and Santa Claus decided to drop by a house. When trying to get down the chimney, got stuck. Unfortunately, the family has a fireplace lit, and the carbon dioxide, waste products from the combustion are accumulating in the house. The house has all their windows closed. What poisoning is everybody in the house at risk of? Drop your answers in the comment section. Okay, so now I think I can explain the parable. So some is the heart, right? And its milk delivery is the oxygen that is trying to. Some's business is the heart and the blood vessels and the blood, right? And the milk that is trying to deliver is the oxygen. Okay, great. Now some comes against the math problem, comes against the problem of trying to deliver his milk to all the people in the town and not having to overwork, right? So he comes up with a plan to purchase a van. That van is hemoglobin, right? Now the van goes around and is able to deliver, but we notice that during the course of his business, one of his employees decides to hijack his van and use it to deliver alcohol. Now that alcohol is carbon monoxide, and carbon monoxide, you realize that the employee was making a lot of money from transporting alcohol to clubs and pubs than he would if he was selling milk. And the employee stated that he was making 240 times. And that's the affinity of carbon monoxide for it. Now you realize that when Sam has the app, remember he got a van and got an app. You realize that at the drop-off points we have B, and at the pickup points we have H. Those are the Boyle-Howden effects. And remember, they are caused by carbon dioxide and acidity effect on hemoglobin. Alright, so when it comes to part 2, Sam asked the question whether he should base his output on number of empty bottles or the number of milk he's able to produce, and we'd all agree to the fact that it's better to make your output based on empty bottles. And it's the same in our respiratory system. So our respiratory system bases its ventilation or respiratory rate of the carbon dioxide produced, which is the waste product, right? Then also, some also finds out that it's more likely to give oxygen to its loyal customers over time. And this was just me trying to paint out the fact that 2,3-bisphosphoglycerate develops in red blood cells in order to allow them to donate oxygen to cells, especially in cases of chronically chronic arterial reduced arterial partial pressures of oxygen. Then you also get to the point where scenarios where Sam is not able to get his milk to his customers, bad route, so like a high altitude, right? Then in cases where somebody is loading alcohol instead of milk, like in carbon monoxide poison, or if his factory closed down, right, which is circulatory failure, or if he goes there and because of a bad name and people don't pick up his milk. So that's a case of histotoxic hypoxia, like in cyanide poisoning. So yeah, so that's it.